The emergency lights in the council chamber cast strange shadows across the walls. Dren watched the recording for the 5th time, and it still made his spine ridge stiffen in ways he had not felt since his first real combat. The other council members sat in silence, their various forms of unease obvious across a dozen different species. Replay the section at timestamp 4722, Council Leader Vima said quietly. The holographic display shifted, showing the border zone between Talaxian and Gren territories. 2 small fleets faced each other in the standard pre-battle formation. Everything looked normal for a minor territorial dispute. Both sides had agreed to the usual terms through the proper diplomatic channels. 3 hours of engagement, limited weapon systems, and whoever scored the most disabled ships would gain the mining rights to the nearby asteroid cluster. Clean, civilized, and nobody had to actually die. Then the human freighter appeared at the edge of the sensor range. They were just passing through, Dren explained to the newer council members. The vessel was called the Prairie Wind, registered out of Earth's North American sector. Cargo hauler, 5 crew members aboard. They had no idea there was a battle scheduled in that region. On the display, the freighter immediately changed course when it detected the military vessels. The captain apparently tried to slip around the engagement zone. Everything would have been fine if a stray Gren missile had not damaged their engine during the opening exchange. The Prairie Wind sent out a distress signal, Dren continued. Both the Talaxian and Gren commanders did the honorable thing and called a temporary ceasefire to render aid. But the humans said they could fix their own engine if both sides just gave them 30 minutes. What happened next still seemed impossible, even watching it for the 5th time. A human named Roy left his ship in an emergency suit and somehow made his way to the nearby Talaxian vessel. The Talaxians let him aboard, thinking he needed medical attention. Instead, Roy went straight to their weapon systems and started working on them without permission. When the Talaxian weapons officer tried to stop him, Roy explained through a translator that he noticed their plasma conduits were running hot, and he could fix it real quick. Real quick turned into Roy completely rebuilding their targeting system using parts he had in his suit pockets and some wire he pulled from a wall panel. The Talaxians were too shocked to stop him. By the time Roy finished, their weapons were firing 40% faster than design specifications. He also accidentally disabled 3 safety protocols that the Talaxian government had spent 2 centuries perfecting. Meanwhile, another human named Beth took a shuttle over to the Gren flagship and offered to help their medical team prepare for casualties. The Gren physician allowed this, thinking the human might learn something about proper military medicine. Instead, Beth took one look at their medical bay and started rearranging everything. "Where are your trauma supplies?" Beth kept asking through her translator. "Why is everything locked in cabinets? People are going to be bleeding, you need quick access." The Gren physician tried to explain that in civilized warfare, injuries were minor and controlled. They had plenty of time to access supplies from secured storage. Beth looked at him like he had grown a second head and started pulling emergency equipment out into the open anyway. She also mixed up what she called a field hospital kit, using materials she found in the Gren supply room, creating combinations of medicine that technically violated about 15 Galactic Health Council regulations. The battle resumed after the 30-minute break. Both commanders expected a normal engagement. Instead, the Talaxian weapons fired so fast that the Gren fleet fell into complete defensive positions within the first 10 minutes. The Gren commander called for a ceasefire, claiming the Talaxians had violated the agreement by using illegal weapon modifications. During the argument, 3 Talaxian ships took damage from return fire. Beth went into what she called emergency mode and started treating Talaxian casualties even though they were technically the enemy. She kept their wounded alive through injuries that should have killed them within minutes, using techniques that made the Gren physician physically ill to watch. She even went outside the ship in a borrowed suit to pull a wounded Talaxian pilot from a damaged fighter, something no sane military medic would ever attempt during active combat. The battle fell apart completely after that. The Talaxians were upset that their honor had been questioned. The Gren were horrified that their enemy was receiving impossibly good medical care. Roy tried to help by offering to balance things out and upgrade the Gren weapons too. Both commanders started screaming at each other and at the humans at the same time. The 3-hour engagement turned into a 16-hour nightmare of confusion, accusations, and treaty violations. The humans kept trying to help both sides, which somehow made everything worse. By the end, both fleets retreated without any clear winner, and the commanders filed formal complaints with the Galactic Council about human interference. Dren stopped the recording and looked at the council members. This is not the first incident. We have reports from 4 other conflicts where humans accidentally became involved. Every single time, the warfare became unpredictable and dangerous. The humans do not understand our protocols. They come from a world where combat means something very different. They were just trying to help, Council Leader Vima said. Yes, Dren agreed. And that is exactly the problem. When humans help, they do not follow any rules we recognize. They take risks that make no tactical sense. They care about individual lives in ways that disrupt military planning. They improvise solutions that break every safety standard we have developed. What do you recommend? Another council member asked. Dren pulled up a document he had spent 3 days preparing. We issue a galactic alert. Every species needs to know that humans should never be present during military conflicts. Not as participants, not as observers, not even as bystanders passing through. Their presence changes everything about how warfare works. The council chamber fell silent as members read through his proposal. Finally, Vima spoke. This will offend the humans. Their government will protest. Probably, Dren said. But better they feel offended than we risk more incidents like this. The humans do not fight like we do. They do not help like we do. They are dangerous in ways they do not even understand themselves. The vote was unanimous. The alert would go out within the day. The message boards across the galactic network exploded within hours of the alert going live. Millions of species from thousands of worlds suddenly had access to the same strange document with the red warning header that roughly translated to extreme caution advised in most languages. The Vortan homeworld. Military Commander Thoris read through the alert 3 times before laughing out loud. The idea that any species needed a warning about tiny, weak humans seemed like a joke. Vortans had fought in 17 major campaigns across the last century. Their military academies were considered the finest in 4 sectors. The notion that these soft little mammals from Earth could disrupt professional warfare struck him as ridiculous. Send this to the junior officers as a comedy piece, he told his aide. They could use a laugh during training exercises. In the Shen Directorate's Intelligence Center, the response was very different. Analyst Kren pulled up every recorded interaction between humans and other species, feeding the data into advanced prediction models. The results made her nervous. Human behavior patterns did not match any known classification system. They registered as peaceful traders in 94% of encounters, but showed extreme protective responses when they perceived threats to others. The contradiction made no logical sense. Pull all commercial shipping data for human vessels, she ordered her team. I want tracking algorithms on every registered ship from Earth. If this alert is real, we need to know where humans are at all times. The Mirani Federation took immediate action. Within 6 hours of receiving the alert, they had marked every human trade route with hazard warnings and established strict protocols for their border stations. Any human vessel approaching Mirani space would be politely redirected to alternative routes that avoided any region with potential military activity. The Mirani had not survived 5,000 years as a peaceful civilization by ignoring warnings from the Galactic Council. On Earth, the reaction was less organized and far more emotional. Ambassador Patricia Hughes sat in her office on the human embassy station, watching news feeds from a dozen different worlds. The alert had been translated into human languages within minutes, and now every major Earth government was demanding explanations. Her communication console would not stop flashing. The North American Union wanted a statement. The Asian Coalition wanted an emergency meeting. The European Federation wanted her recalled for consultation. The African League wanted to file a formal protest. Everyone wanted something, and Patricia had no idea what to tell them. She pulled up the actual alert document and read through the attachment files. They included the footage from the Prairie Wind incident, along with detailed analysis from Galactic Command. The reports described human behavior as tactically irrational, emotionally driven, and dangerously unpredictable in combat situations. They think we are crazy, Patricia said to herself. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Daniel Carter entered, still wearing his military liaison uniform. The young officer looked angry, which was exactly how Patricia felt but could not afford to show. Have you seen what they are saying about us? Daniel demanded. The Talaxian news networks are calling us barbarians. The Gren published a medical journal article about how human emergency care violates the laws of civilized medicine. We save lives and they call us dangerous. Patricia gestured for him to sit down. Show me the medical article. Daniel pulled it up on his personal display. The Gren physician who had worked with Beth wrote a detailed analysis of her treatment methods. He described how she performed what humans called CPR on a patient whose heart had stopped. In Gren society, when someone's heart stopped during combat, it meant they had honorably fallen. You held a ceremony and remembered them. You did not pound on their chest and force air into their lungs until they came back. She brought 3 soldiers back from death. The article stated, she would not accept that they had fallen. She fought against the natural order with her bare hands and forced life back into bodies that should have rested. This is not medicine. This is something else entirely. They act like Beth committed a crime, Daniel said. She saved lives. Patricia rubbed her eyes. She had not slept in 30 hours. Read the comparative casualty reports from their normal conflicts. In the average Talaxian-Gren border dispute, they expect maybe 5 to 7 serious injuries across both fleets. Total. For a 3-hour battle involving 40 ships, their warfare is not like ours, Daniel. They fight until someone gets hurt, then they stop and talk about it. That is not fighting, that is playing pretend. To them, our history is the pretend part that cannot be real. I had a Kalish commander ask me if our World War II numbers were a translation error. He could not believe that 50 million humans died in one conflict. His species has not lost 50 million individuals to warfare in their entire recorded history. Daniel went quiet. Patricia pulled up more files, showing him the comparative data that Galactic Command had included in the alert. The numbers were hard to argue with. In the past 1,000 years of recorded galactic warfare, the average conflict resulted in 0.003% casualties relative to total military forces involved. Most soldiers never saw real combat. Most battles ended with negotiated settlements after limited engagement. Then there was human history. Wars that lasted for years. Cities burned to the ground. Soldiers fighting until they ran out of ammunition, then fighting with knives, then fighting with their bare hands. The concept of total war, where entire populations mobilized for conflict, did not exist anywhere else in the known galaxy. We come from a death world, Patricia said quietly. I used to think that was just a rating system, a way to classify planets. But they are right, Daniel. Earth taught us to fight in ways the rest of the galaxy never learned. We think their warfare is strange because we measure it against our own history. They think we are terrifying for the same reason. So what do we do? Daniel asked. Patricia looked at the alert document still displayed on her screen. We accept it. We train our pilots and merchants to avoid conflict zones. We make sure no human ship goes anywhere near military operations. And we hope that this calms down before someone decides humans are too dangerous to have in space at all. The communication console flashed again. Another government wanted answers. Patricia took a deep breath and reached for the controls. The explanations were going to take a long time. The territorial dispute between the Vortan Empire and the Krill sovereignty had been brewing for months. Both sides claimed historical rights to a mineral-rich moon orbiting a gas giant in the neutral buffer zone. Diplomatic talks went nowhere. Finally, both governments agreed to settle the matter through traditional military contest. Commander Thoris led the Vortan fleet into position, feeling confident. His forces outnumbered the Krill by a comfortable margin, and Vortan battle tactics were studied in military academies across 3 sectors. This would be a clean victory that would secure the mining rights and add another honor mark to his service record. The Krill fleet took up position on the opposite side of the moon. Both commanders exchanged the ritual challenges through secure channels. Both confirmed they would follow the galactic conventions on limited warfare. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then the distress signal came through. A medical transport vessel was reporting drive failure in the nearby system. The ship was registered out of Earth. Thoris checked the regulations. Medical vessels were protected under galactic law during conflicts. He was required to offer assistance. Bring them in, he ordered. Keep them away from the combat zone, and we will send an engineering team after the engagement. The human medical ship limped into the Vortan staging area on emergency power. Thoris met with their captain, a tired-looking woman named Linda, and explained the situation. The battle would begin in 2 hours. The humans would be kept safe in the rear position, and once the conflict was resolved, the Vortons would help repair their drive system. "You're going to fight?" Linda asked through her translator. "Are there going to be wounded?" "Some injuries are expected," Thoris replied. "Nothing your medical bay needs to concern itself with. We have our own physicians." Linda looked out at the Vortan fleet, then at the krill positions visible on the long-range scanners. "How many ships are out there?" 63 on our side, 51 on theirs. Standard engagement numbers for a territorial claim of this value. "And you said some injuries are expected?" Linda's translator made her voice sound flat, but Thoris could sense confusion in her body language. "How are you planning to minimize casualties?" "The usual protocols," Thoris explained patiently. "Targeting systems locked to disable rather than destroy, medical teams on standby, automated surrender signals when a ship takes critical damage. We are civilized species, Doctor. We do not slaughter each other over mining rights." Linda was quiet for a moment. "We have 17 medical staff on this ship. If you are going into battle and people are going to get hurt, we should help. That is what we do." Thoris made the decision he would regret for the rest of his career. Having extra medical staff seemed like a tactical advantage. The krill would see the human ship and know the Vortons had superior medical support. It might even convince them to surrender faster. "Very well," Thoris agreed. "You may coordinate with our medical teams, but stay out of the combat zones." The battle began exactly on schedule. The first exchange of fire was clean and professional. 3 krill ships took minor damage and withdrew. 2 Vorton vessels reported disabled weapon systems and retreated to safe positions. Everything was going according to plan. Then Linda saw the first wounded soldier brought into the Vorton medical bay. The young officer had taken shrapnel from an exploding console. He was conscious, in pain, but stable. The Vortan physician was preparing a sedative for transport to the rear medical station. "Why are you not treating him?" Linda demanded. "He is stable. We will treat him properly once the engagement concludes." "Standard protocol." Linda stared at the physician like he had said something insane. "He has metal fragments in his shoulder and possible internal bleeding. He needs treatment now. The battle is still ongoing. We treat critical injuries only during active combat. This soldier can wait 2 hours." Linda pushed past the Vortan physician and started examining the wounded officer. Her hands moved with quick, practiced efficiency. She pulled a medical scanner from her belt and ran it over his torso. "He has a punctured lung. You said this can wait 2 hours? The injury is not immediately fatal. We have protocols. Your protocols are going to kill him." Linda was already pulling out instruments. "Someone get me a surgical kit, now." What happened over the next hour spread through the Vortan fleet like radiation. Linda and her team started treating every wounded soldier as if they were in a crisis situation. They did not wait for the battle to end. They did not follow proper chain of command for medical prioritization. They just grabbed whoever was bleeding and started fixing them. A high-ranking Vortan officer with minor burns was told to wait because a low-level technician had a head injury. This violated every principle of Vortan military medicine, which treated soldiers based on rank and honor standing. Linda did not care about rank. She cared about who was hurt worse. The human medical team also did not understand the concept of acceptable losses. When a Vortan pilot was declared too damaged to save, Linda refused to accept it. She worked on him for 40 minutes, using techniques that made the Vortan physicians feel physically sick. She brought him back from the edge of death through sheer stubborn determination, then yelled at the Vortan medical staff for giving up too easily. Meanwhile, Paul from the human engineering crew had started helping with logistics. He took one look at how the Vortons were managing their supply lines and nearly had a breakdown. Why is ammunition stored in 3 different locations? Why does it take 20 minutes to get medical supplies to the forward ships? This is completely inefficient. The Vortan logistics officer tried to explain that the system was based on centuries of tradition and proper military organization. Paul ignored him and started reorganizing everything using what he called just-in-time delivery systems. Within 30 minutes, supplies were reaching ships 3 times faster than before. It completely disrupted the careful timing of Vortan battle tactics. The engagement that should have lasted 3 hours turned into a confused mess that dragged on for 7 hours. The krill commander kept calling for clarifications because the Vortan fleet was not following standard tactical patterns anymore. Thoris could not explain that a human logistics officer had accidentally revolutionized his supply chain in the middle of combat. When the battle finally ended, both sides were exhausted and confused. The Vortons had technically won more tactical points, but nobody felt good about it. Thoris met with Linda afterward, trying to find words to explain why her help had made everything worse. "Your medical techniques saved lives," he admitted. "Probably a dozen soldiers who would have died under our protocols. But you broke every rule of civilized warfare in the process. My officers do not know how to function in a military structure, where rank does not determine medical priority. You disrupted command chains that have existed for centuries." Linda looked at him with those strange human eyes that showed too much emotion. "I saved lives and you are angry about it?" "I am not angry. I am terrified." Thoris pulled up the casualty reports. "In a normal engagement of this size, we expect 5 to 8 serious injuries. You treated 47 soldiers today. 47 because you would not let any of them die. The battle kept going. Ships stayed in combat longer because they knew medical care was better. Soldiers took risks they normally would not take. You changed how we fight, Doctor, just by being here." Thoris sent his report to Galactic Command that night. It included a formal apology for ignoring the alert about humans, and a detailed explanation of why the warning should be taken seriously. He also recommended that the alert be upgraded to a mandatory protocol with enforcement mechanisms. The Galactic Council received similar reports from 4 other conflicts in the following weeks. Every species that ignored the warning learned the same lesson. Humans changed warfare just by being present, and not in ways anyone could predict or control. The lecture hall at the Galactic Institute of Warfare Studies held 3,000 students from 200 different species. Professor Tillich had taught military history for 15 years, but she had never seen this kind of attendance for one of her presentations. The topic of human warfare had become the most requested subject across the entire academic network. Tillich adjusted the holographic display and looked out at the crowd. Every seat was filled. Students sat in the aisles. Some species hung from the ceiling supports because they could not find floor space. News feeds from a dozen worlds were streaming the lecture live. She took a breath and began. "Most of you are here because you want to understand the Galactic Command alert about humans," Tillich said. "You want to know why one small species from a single planet has caused so much concern among military leaders across known space. The answer is complicated, but I will try to explain it in terms that make sense across all our different cultures." She pulled up an image of Earth rotating slowly in space. "This is a Class 12 deathworld. The classification exists because Earth has conditions that would kill most of us within days or even hours. Extreme temperature variations, dangerous weather patterns, predatory animals, poisonous plants, disease organisms that evolve faster than medical science can track them. Earth is a nightmare planet, and humans evolved there over millions of years." The image shifted to show human evolutionary history. Humans are persistence hunters. Their ancestors would chase prey animals for days across open terrain until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Most species develop speed or strength or camouflage. Humans develop the ability to just keep going. They overheat slowly. They can run for hours. They heal from injuries that would permanently disable most species. And most importantly, they do not have strong instincts that tell them when to quit. A student from the Vorton delegation raised a hand. "But this is biology. How does it relate to warfare?" Tillich smiled. "That is the right question. Let me show you something." She pulled up footage from human military history, edited to remove the most disturbing content. "This is from a conflict humans call World War I. Watch these soldiers." The footage showed human troops advancing across open ground while explosives fell around them. They climbed out of trenches and walked into enemy fire. When they fell, others took their places. The advance continued for hours. In most civilized warfare, a military unit that takes 15% casualties will retreat and request reinforcements, Tillich explained. "This is logical. This is how you preserve your forces and maintain strategic advantage. Humans do not work this way. Historical records show human military units fighting past 50% casualties, sometimes past 70%. There are recorded instances of human units fighting until only a handful of soldiers remained alive, and those survivors still did not surrender." The lecture hall was completely silent. Tillich continued. "Now you might think this makes humans excellent soldiers, and in some ways you would be correct. But look at what this means for the kind of warfare the rest of the galaxy practices. Our conflicts are based on the assumption that both sides will behave rationally. We fight until the cost becomes too high, then we negotiate. Humans have a different calculation. They often continue fighting long after the rational choice would be to stop. She pulled up new data. Humans also have something their language calls spite. It is a willingness to accept terrible costs just to prevent an enemy from winning. Let me give you an example. In a human conflict called World War II, one nation destroyed its own cities and resources rather than let them fall into enemy hands. They burned their own crops. They demolished their own factories. They made their own territory worthless because they preferred losing everything to letting their enemy have anything. That is insane, someone muttered in the crowd. To us, yes, Tillich agreed. To humans, it is called patriotism, and they consider it noble. This is the species the galaxy wants to keep out of our conflicts, not because they are particularly violent by their own standards, but because they do not calculate costs the way we do. She switched to medical footage from the Vortan incident. Now let me show you the other side of human behavior that makes them dangerous. This is from the recent engagement where human medical staff treated Vortan casualties. Watch what this doctor does. The footage showed Linda working on a wounded soldier whose heart had stopped. She performed chest compressions for 18 minutes without stopping, then used electrical stimulation to restart the heart. The soldier survived. In most species, including Vortans, when someone's heart stops during combat, they are honored and mourned. The human doctor refused to accept this. She fought against death itself with her bare hands. She spent 18 minutes manually pumping blood through a body that had stopped functioning. This is not normal medical behavior by our standards. This is something else. Tillich pulled up comparative data. Humans have a concept they call compassion, which exists in most species. But human compassion operates at a level that disrupts military logic. They will violate tactical doctrine to save individuals who, by rational calculation, are not worth the risk. They will divert resources from strategic objectives to rescue single wounded soldiers. They will refuse direct orders if those orders conflict with their emotional need to protect others. A student from the Shen Directorate spoke up. You are describing a species that combines extreme aggression with extreme empathy. How is that possible? That is exactly the problem, Tillich said. Human psychology is full of these contradictions. They will destroy themselves to stop an enemy, but they will also destroy themselves to save a stranger. You cannot predict which response you will get. Sometimes humans themselves do not know which response they will have until the moment arrives. She pulled up the final section of her presentation. Let me show you what happens when you add spite and compassion together in a combat situation. This is from an incident in human history. A human medical unit was trapped behind enemy lines, cut off from their own forces. They had wounded soldiers who could not travel. The logical choice was to surrender or abandon the wounded and escape. The humans chose neither option. The footage showed a small group of human medics defending a field hospital against a much larger enemy force. They fought for 3 days with limited ammunition and no hope of rescue. They held their position because moving the wounded would kill them. When relief forces finally arrived, 5 of the 8 medics were dead, but every wounded soldier had survived. This is why Galactic Command issued the alert. Tillich said quietly. Humans do not fight like we do. They do not make rational decisions about acceptable losses. They will either give up too easily because they care too much about individual lives, or they will refuse to give up at all because they care too much about individual lives. The same emotional drive produces opposite results depending on circumstances we cannot predict. She pulled up one more image. A graph comparing casualty rates across different species during warfare. Humans have the highest survival rate for wounded soldiers of any species in the galaxy. Their medical technology is not superior to ours. Their physicians are not better trained than ours. They just refuse to let people die. A Vortan doctor will triage a patient as terminal and move on. A human doctor will work on that patient for hours, using techniques that seem insane and somehow keep them alive. But they also have the highest rate of post-combat psychological damage. Humans call it trauma, and it affects nearly every soldier who sees serious combat. Their minds were not designed for the kind of violence they inflict on each other. They fight in ways that damage themselves, and they do it anyway. Tillich closed her presentation. You wanted to understand why Galactic Command wants to keep humans out of our battles. Here is the simple answer. Humans make war personal in ways the rest of the galaxy does not. They care too much, and they never know when to quit. If you involve humans in your conflicts, those conflicts will change into something none of us recognize anymore. So what do? A student asked. We stay away from them when we fight each other, Tillich said. We respect the alert, and we hope that humans stay peaceful, because if they ever decide to apply their full capacity for violence against the rest of the galaxy, I am not sure any of us would survive the encounter. The lecture ended to complete silence. Students filed out slowly, processing what they had learned. The recording went viral across the galactic network within hours. It was translated into 500 languages and became required viewing for military officers in 30 different governments. And across known space, species looked at humans with new understanding and new fear. The war between the Shen Directorate and the Tovar Republic started over something stupid. Mining rights to an asteroid field that neither side really needed, but both sides wanted on principle. Diplomats talked for 6 months and got nowhere. Finally, both governments decided to settle things the old way, through limited military engagement. Commander Kren oversaw the Shen fleet positioning. Everything was organized and proper. The Tovar forces took their positions on the other side of the disputed territory. Both sides confirmed they had checked for human presence in the region. The nearest human vessel was 8 light-years away, well outside the conflict zone. The Galactic Command Alert had been taken seriously by both governments. The war proceeded normally for 3 weeks. Ships exchanged fire during scheduled engagement periods. Both sides kept careful count of tactical points scored. Casualties were minimal and properly documented. A few captured pilots were exchanged through neutral intermediaries. Everything followed the proper protocols. Then the orbital strike mistake happened. A Tovar weapons platform experienced a targeting malfunction during a routine firing exercise. The missiles that should have hit an empty asteroid instead struck a neutral refugee station, orbiting a nearby moon. 3,000 civilians died in the explosions. Species from 17 different worlds, all of them trying to escape conflicts in other regions. Both militaries immediately ceased fire when the news broke. Commanders from both sides met on neutral ground to coordinate the investigation. Nobody wanted this. The Tovar government issued formal apologies. The Shen Directorate offered humanitarian assistance. Both sides agreed that the war would remain paused until proper accountability was established. But the refugees who survived had nowhere to go. The station was destroyed. Rescue ships pulled survivors from the debris and took them to temporary shelters on the moon's surface. But those facilities were never meant for long-term habitation. Thousands of people needed food, medicine, and protection. The Shen and Tovar governments promised aid, but military logistics moved slowly, and both sides were reluctant to send resources into what was technically still a combat zone. Grace heard about the crisis while her ship was 3 systems away. She worked for an organization called Reach Outward, a human aid group that operated on the edges of civilized space. They helped refugees, disaster victims, anyone who needed assistance and had nowhere else to turn. The organization ran on donations and volunteers, and nobody could quite understand why humans spent so much money helping complete strangers from species they had never met. We need to go there, Grace told her crew. They were on a transport ship carrying medical supplies, food synthesizers, and temporary shelter equipment. 3 other ships from Reach Outward were close enough to help. The region is still an active war zone, her pilot Robert pointed out. Both governments have restricted access. We would need clearance from 2 different military commands just to enter the system. 3,000 people just died, Grace said quietly. Survivors are sitting in emergency shelters that were designed to hold people for maybe 2 days. How long do you think diplomatic clearance is going to take? Robert knew that tone. Grace had made up her mind. I will plot the course, and he said. The 4 human ships entered the system without clearance 18 hours later. Both military commands detected them immediately and sent warning messages. Unauthorized vessels in a combat zone would be escorted out by force if necessary. Grace responded to both messages with the same statement. This is Grace Williams from Reach Outward. We are a humanitarian aid organization. We have supplies for the refugee survivors on the moon. We are not taking sides in your conflict. We are going to help people who need help. You can escort us if you want, but we are going to the moon. The Shen commander did not know what to do with that. The humans were violating about 15 different military regulations just by being there, but they were clearly marked as aid vessels, and shooting them would create a diplomatic nightmare that would make the accidental refugee station strike look minor by comparison. Let them through, Kren ordered. But keep watch. If they try anything unusual, we detain them immediately. The human ships landed on the moon near the refugee shelters. Grace and her team started unloading supplies before the cargo ramps fully extended. They moved with urgent efficiency, like they were racing against time, even though there was no immediate deadline. A Tovar military liaison met Grace as she directed volunteers carrying food synthesizers toward the largest shelter. You should not be here. This is a restricted military zone. We have proper aid shipments being organized through official channels. Grace looked at him. How long until those official aid shipments arrive? 3 to 5 days. Possibly a week, depending on clearance processing. People need food today. They need medicine today. They need shelter that does not leak atmosphere today. Grace kept walking, forcing the liaison to follow her. You can file whatever complaints you want after we are done helping. Over the next 6 hours, the human aid workers spread through the refugee camps with a determination that made the military observers nervous. They did not ask permission for anything. They just saw problems and started fixing them. Robert found a shelter where the environmental systems were failing. The refugees inside were slowly suffocating as carbon dioxide levels rose. The proper procedure was to file a maintenance request and wait for certified technicians. Robert took one look at the system, pulled a toolbox from his ship, and started rebuilding the air recyclers using spare parts and improvised solutions that definitely violated manufacturer specifications. The system started working again within 2 hours. A human teacher named Amy discovered that over 300 refugee children were traumatized and scared. With no organized care while their parents tried to manage survival logistics, Amy immediately started setting up a school in one of the empty shelter sections. She had no official authorization. She had no proper facility. She just gathered the children and started teaching them, using whatever materials she could find. They need stability, Amy explained when a Shen officer questioned her. Their world just fell apart. Education gives them something normal to focus on. It can wait, really? Tell that to the 6-year-old who watched her entire station explode. Grace herself spent most of her time negotiating with both military commands simultaneously. She needed medical supplies from the Shen. She needed transport vehicles from the Tovar. She needed both sides to establish safe corridors so aid could flow freely, and she did all of this by making military commanders feel personally responsible for refugee suffering in ways that did not translate well across species, but worked anyway. When a Tovar officer explained that they could not allow human transport through certain zones for tactical security reasons, Grace asked a simple question. How do you sleep at night knowing children are hungry because of your tactical security? The question should not have worked. It was emotional, not logical. It ignored legitimate military concerns, but something about the way Grace said it, the way she looked at the officer with those expressive human eyes, made the answer matter in ways military doctrine did not account for. The officer authorized the transport corridor that same day. Both militaries found themselves making concessions they would never normally make. The humans did not have official authority. They had no diplomatic status. They were just civilians who showed up and started helping people, completely ignoring the war that was technically still ongoing around them. The human presence made continuing the war psychologically unbearable. Every time commanders tried to resume tactical planning, they had to account for human aid workers moving through the combat zones. Every time they scheduled an engagement, they had to check whether humans would be in the blast radius. The humans did not acknowledge the war as a valid reason to stop helping refugees. After 2 weeks, both governments agreed to a formal ceasefire. The official reason was to allow proper humanitarian assistance to flow to the refugee survivors. The real reason, though nobody said it out loud, was that fighting a war while humans were running aid operations in the middle of the battlefield felt wrong in ways that were hard to explain. Grace stood on the moon surface, watching the last refugee families board transport ships to safer locations. Robert walked up beside her looking exhausted but satisfied. We just ended a war, he said quietly. We helped some people, Grace corrected. The war ended because they decided it was not worth continuing. They decided that after we showed up and made them feel bad about fighting while refugees were suffering. You know, that is what happened. Grace shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they were looking for a reason to stop and we gave them one. Either way, people got help. That is what matters. 3 days later, Both the Shen Directorate and the Tovar Republic sent formal complaints to the Galactic Council about human interference in military operations. The complaints included detailed documentation about how human aid workers had disrupted proper military protocols, violated security zones, and manipulated commanders using emotional appeals that bypassed rational decision-making. They also both sent formal thank you messages to reach outward for the humanitarian assistance. Nobody knew quite what to make of that contradiction, but it was very typically human. The council chamber looked different now than it had 6 months ago. More security monitors, additional diplomatic stations, translation systems upgraded to handle emergency communications. Everything about the room reflected the changes that had swept across the galaxy since the first alert about humans. Ambassador Patricia Hughes stood at the center of the chamber, representing Earth and all human interests in this sector of space. Around her sat representatives from 43 major governments and over 200 minor ones. Every species that had military capabilities wanted a voice in this discussion. Council Leader Vima opened the session with a formal statement. We are here to vote on Protocol 7H, which will establish binding regulations regarding human presence during military conflicts. The draft protocol has been reviewed by all member governments. Does anyone wish to speak before we proceed to the vote? Patricia raised her hand. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed her statement a dozen times. But standing here in front of the entire galactic community, representing a species that had become known as the most dangerous civilians in known space, the words felt different. I would like to address the council, she said. Vima gestured for her to proceed. The council recognizes Ambassador Hughes. Patricia took a breath. 6 months ago, your government issued an alert warning species to keep humans away from military conflicts. Since then, we have read the reports. We have watched the footage. We have seen how our people affect your warfare, and I will not stand here and deny the evidence. Humans do change conflicts just by being present. We do not follow your protocols. We do not calculate risks the way you do. We act on emotion and instinct in ways that disrupt everything you consider normal about warfare. She pulled up a display showing the incidents that had occurred. The prairie wind, the Vortan engagement, the refugee crisis. Each one showed humans behaving in ways that made perfect sense to them, but seemed irrational to everyone else. You call us dangerous. You say we are unpredictable. You are correct on both counts, but I want you to understand something about why we are this way. Patricia switched the display to show Earth. This is a Class 12 deathworld. Most of you know that classification. What you might not understand is what it means to evolve on a planet that tries to kill you every single day. She showed footage from Earth, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, predatory animals. We developed technology, science, civilization, but underneath all of that, we are still animals from a world that taught us one lesson over and over: never give up. The moment you stop fighting, you die. That instinct runs so deep in us that we cannot turn it off even when logic says we should. A representative from the Vortan delegation spoke up. We understand your evolutionary history, Ambassador, but understanding why humans are dangerous does not make them less dangerous. Your medics save lives in ways that violate military protocol. Your engineers solve problems in ways that break safety regulations. Your aid workers ignore war zones entirely and just help people regardless of tactical situations. You act like the rules do not apply to you. We act like people matter more than rules, Patricia corrected quietly. And yes, I know that disrupts how you do things. I know it makes your commanders nervous. I know it changes the nature of conflict in ways you cannot predict. But before you vote to restrict us, I want you to consider something. She pulled up new data. Statistics on warfare across the galaxy over the past 1,000 years. Your civilized warfare has very low casualties. You fight until the cost gets too high, then you negotiate. You preserve your forces and maintain your military capabilities for future conflicts. It is logical. It is rational. It is the smart way to handle territorial disputes and political disagreements. But it also means you never really resolve anything. You have been fighting the same border disputes for centuries. The Talaxian Empire and the Gren Coalition have gone to war 17 times over the same mining territories. The Shen and Tovar were fighting over asteroids neither side actually needed. Your warfare is civilized, but it is also eternal. You never commit enough to win decisively, and you never lose badly enough to give up completely. Patricia switched to showing human history. She had edited carefully, removing the most graphic content, but the scale was still shocking. Human warfare is brutal. We have killed each other in numbers that horrify you. We have destroyed entire cities. We have fought wars that lasted for years. And yes, we regret much of this history. We have spent centuries trying to stop fighting each other. But when we do fight, we resolve things. We commit fully. We accept terrible costs to achieve clear victories or accept clear defeats. Our wars end with treaties that last because everyone involved remembers the price of fighting. We do not have century-long cycles of limited warfare over the same territories. The chamber was silent. Patricia continued. You want to keep us out of your battles because we make them too real. We turn your civilized conflicts into something visceral and personal. We care too much about individual lives to let proper military planning proceed smoothly. We refuse to accept that some casualties are just the cost of doing business. She looked around at the hundreds of species represented in the chamber. Maybe that's exactly what you need. Maybe your civilized warfare stays civilized because everyone agrees to play the same game. But maybe that game is broken. Maybe conflicts that drag on for centuries with no resolution are worse than conflicts that end decisively, even at higher cost. Council leader Vima spoke carefully. Are you suggesting humans should be involved in galactic warfare? No, Patricia said immediately. I am not. I think Protocol 7H is probably necessary. Keep us away from your conflicts. We will stay out. But I want you to be honest about why you are doing it. You are not keeping us out because we are violent. Most humans are not particularly violent by our own standards. You are keeping us out because we make you question whether you have been doing warfare wrong this entire time. Daniel Carter watched from the human delegation section as Patricia finished her statement. He had worked with her for months preparing this response, and she had delivered it perfectly. But he knew it would not change the vote. Protocol 7H was going to pass. Every major government had already committed to supporting it. The vote proceeded formally. 347 governments voted in favor. 12 abstained. 3 voted against, and those 3 were small colonies who had never been involved in military conflicts anyway. Protocol 7H was now galactic law. The protocol established clear restrictions. No human vessels within 50 light-years of active combat zones. Species engaging in warfare must confirm 0 human presence before commencing operations. Any human civilians who entered a combat situation must be evacuated immediately and treated as a natural, disaster-level threat to military operations. Patricia accepted the protocol on behalf of Earth. We will comply with these restrictions. Human vessels will avoid combat zones. We will establish tracking systems so our ships can be located at all times. We will work with your militaries to ensure no accidental encounters. She paused. But I want something in return. If you are going to declare us too dangerous for your warfare, then your warfare better stay civilized. No accidental refugee station strikes. No expanded conflict zones that trap civilian populations. No long sieges that create humanitarian crises. Because if we hear about innocent people suffering because of your conflicts, Protocol 7H will not keep us away. We will come help, and you will have to either let us or shoot us. And I do not think you want to find out what happens if you shoot human aid workers. The threat was delivered calmly, but everyone in the chamber understood it. Humans would comply with the protocol until they decided that moral obligations outweighed legal restrictions, and nobody knew exactly where that line was. 2 weeks later, Daniel stood in the human embassy station watching Earth news feeds. The protocol was causing mixed reactions back home. Some people were angry about being restricted. Others felt insulted that the galaxy considered them dangerous. A few thought the whole situation was funny. His communication console chimed. Message from Commander Dren, the Kalesh officer who had first proposed the alert 6 months ago. Daniel opened it, expecting another formal diplomatic exchange. Instead, he found something personal. A short message that had clearly taken Dren considerable time to compose. Your species terrifies us, not because you are monsters, not because you are evil, but because when we watch you fight or help or simply refuse to give up, you make us question everything we think we know about ourselves. Your warfare is brutal, yes, but it ends. Your compassion is irrational, yes, but it saves lives we would have written off as acceptable losses. You care too much and you never quit, and you do not understand that these things make you dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with violence. We are keeping you out of our battles because we are not ready for what you would teach us about ourselves if we let you in. Maybe we will never be ready, but thank you for agreeing to stay away. And thank you for threatening to come anyway if we create situations that require your help. We needed to hear both messages. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he looked out at Earth, spinning peacefully in the void, home to billions of humans who did not even know they had just been declared too dangerous for galactic warfare. He smiled and sent a simple reply. We will stay out of your way, unless you need us. Then we will come and nothing will stop us. That is just who we are. Somewhere in the vastness of space, wars would continue. Species would fight their civilized conflicts with their proper protocols and minimal casualties. And humans would stay away, watching from a distance until the moment someone needed help badly enough that Protocol 7H became irrelevant. That moment would come eventually. Everyone knew it. And when it did, the galaxy would remember why keeping humans out of battles seemed like such a good idea in the first place.